Marjorie Taylor Greene, elected last year from Georgia's 14th district, which is literally like an R plus 27 seat. It's one of the reddest seats in the entire country. She had been assigned to several committees. And I guess the Democrats decided they really don't like her. So they voted, the Democrats, the majority party, had a vote of the House of Representatives to remove her from her committees over the objections of Kevin McCarthy. This is what's important first off about this vote. This is unprecedented in modern American politics. Usually if a member of the minority party is drawn controversy that could result in them being removed from their committees, the minority party they belong to will deal with them, the party leadership, because they pick who goes on the committees. They make that call. This is the first time that the majority party has overruled the minority party, said, no, we think you do not have the right to make these personnel decisions for yourselves. We're going to vote to remove her from her committees. And 11 Republicans voted with the rest of the Democrats to remove Marjorie Greene from her committees.
Well, that's not actually very surprising. Just to explain for people the reason why they removed her, she was kind of politically neutral when Trump won re-election in 2016. In fact, she wrote on Facebook something to the nature of, okay, whatever, red or blue, I just hope this president does well for America. So she was obviously, she may have even voted for Clinton. I don't know. She obviously was not a hardcore Trump supporter when he got elected. But in 2017, somehow or another, she became activated through the QAnon conspiracy. And she was a very staunch supporter of QAnon, spreading the QAnon propaganda, in fact, built her whole social media persona around being a QAnon supporter. But in addition to that, I think she liked the Facebook post where I was talking about how wildfires in California were started by space lasers.
She actually made the post herself.
She made the post herself about Israeli space lasers.
First off, that post that you referenced, that a lot of people that actually got trending on Twitter, hashtag Jewish space lasers, people are running around saying, oh, Marjorie Greene said Jewish space lasers caused the wildfires in California. She's an anti-Semite. That's not actually what she said. Now, I'm going to defend her here because I think this is fair game. She did mention space lasers possibly causing the wildfires, but she didn't say anything about Jews. Separately in this post, it's a very long paragraph with multiple different things thrown in there, almost like just like a conspiracy theory salad. At one point, she mentions the Rothschilds, who are Jewish. They're a Jewish banking family. And something along the lines of maybe mentioning, they have a vested interest in green energy or something. I don't know. But she mentions the Rothschilds separately from the space lasers. But somehow the media has taken those two completely unrelated things, two and two separate, putting them together to say, she's talking about Jewish space lasers, which is just, it's ridiculous. You can criticize her for things that were said in that post, but to exaggerate to such a gross degree is just unnecessary, and it undermines their argument.
But in addition to that, she, in a Facebook video in 2018, she said, and now we were told that a plane allegedly hit the Pentagon. We don't have any actual proof of that. We've never actually seen a plane in the Pentagon, talking about 9/11. So the question that I think was on a lot of people's minds was, does she still hold these views today? That was the question that was on a lot of people's minds. I think a lot of it was unclear to a lot of people whether or not she held these views today. Now, if I'm in Congress and there's a member of Congress who holds these views, even if they're in my own party, I'm going to vote to remove them from committee, and I'm going to try my best to get them primary, to get them out of my party during the next election. If they held these views in the past and they make it clear that they no longer hold these views, they were misled, it's okay, it's whatever, that was then, this is now. But she never really forcefully communicated that she doesn't hold these views anymore. And so I can understand why there was some it wasn't just about her making controversial statements in the past. There was the question mark of whether she actually believed this herself. And I overheard a conversation in D.C. about a month ago. There were a couple of young Democrats talking about how people were pointing out AOC as being the crazy one in their party. And they said, well, now you've got Marjorie Taylor Greene, so there's no comparison between AOC's crazy and Marjorie Taylor Greene's crazy. Which, by the way, just for people that don't know, who haven't, who aren't from D.C., most people in D.C. don't like AOC. Most of the Democrats around here, AOC is not very popular.
They only dislike her as far as that she clearly does not show respect, I guess, all due respect, to Nancy Pelosi. And
correct, but also,
why wouldn't she?
But also, they're not. Most of the people around here are very much neoliberals. They're not socialists. But anyway, I digress. But anyway, so they were pointing out how Marjorie Taylor Greene makes AOC look normal. And I didn't know who Marjorie Taylor Greene was at the time. Like, I didn't really pay super close attention to who won the House races in the 2020 election. And then about a week later, I heard on Bloomberg radio, they mentioned that Marjorie Taylor Greene believes in QAnon, that she believes that a plane didn't hit the Pentagon, all this other stuff that she believes. And they said that Nancy Pelosi is trying to get her off of her committee assignments. And in a very liberal, biased way, they basically said, we hope that Nancy Pelosi succeeds. So I'm hearing this, I'm thinking, why isn't Marjorie Taylor Greene suing Bloomberg into oblivion? And then I look her up, and every news outlet is reporting that she believes this stuff. And I'm thinking, why is she not taking any action? And the reason is because she never pushed back against it. In August of last year, she gave one interview with Fox in which she kind of hinted that she gave up the QAnon stuff in 2018.
No, I won't disagree with you that she has not been the greatest at messaging in responding to this forcefully and pushing back against the narrative. But I'm still going to defend her and certainly say she did not deserve this, if only because not only, like I said, it's a dangerous precedent that the majority party now says, no, we dictate who's on the committees from the minority party. Furthermore, they're doing this because of things she said before she was elected.
I disagree with that.
I disagree with that because it doesn't matter. I think it does not matter. It'd be one thing if she is an elected member of Congress and uses that platform to say these things. That'd be one thing. But she clearly does not, she will not defend those comments anymore. She's made it clear she has said something along the lines of, I said a few things I probably should not have said, with no specific references.
References.
No, but either way, she clearly is not going to continue saying these things in Congress. She's going to be better, I guess you could say. I do think, yeah, as you said, people draw the comparison. What about her versus AOC? I would go further than that and say, what about her versus Ilhan Omar? As long as you have someone like Ilhan Omar in Congress, who as a member of Congress, while in office, said, among other things, she described 9/11 as, quote, some people did something. She said, it's all about the Benjamins, baby, about the Israeli lobby. Literally said, Israel has hypnotized the world. She, at a rally in front of the United States Capitol in, I think, 2019, as a member of Congress, a Black Lives Matter rally on the east face of the Capitol, took the stage, took the podium, took the microphone, and declared, as a sitting member of Congress, and I quote, America is not going to be a country for white people, end quote. She says these things while in office, and she gets off scot-free and gets praised and is still on her committees with nothing more than a slap on the wrist, not even a slap on the wrist from Pelosi or any of the other people. She gets to do whatever she wants and say these blatantly racist and anti-American things, racist against Jews and against white people, and blatantly talk about how much she hates America, and nothing. But Marjorie Greene, she said a few things back before she was in office, and we got to take her off all her committees. And here's the thing, too, why I got to disagree with you, why I think we should stand behind Marjorie Greene, because this has happened before. People have made the comparisons, I think rightfully so. She's the new Steve King. She's the female Steve King. Be still my beating heart, because I love Steve King. He's my favorite member of Congress of all time. But they did the same thing to him. The New York Times smeared him with a false accusation. He came out. He actually did better on his messaging than Marjorie Greene did, as far as I'm concerned. He explained very articulately what he really said and how the New York Times twisted around his wording to make it sound a lot worse than what he said. Didn't matter. The Republicans still completely threw him off a cliff. And one of the first people actually to come out against him and demand he be primaried was our buddy Ben Shapiro, who publicly called for him to get primaried. And of course, he did get primaried. Rest in peace. But they did it to him. They're doing it to Marjorie Greene. They're already gearing up to go after next. They're already tying her directly to Marjorie Greene. Lauren Boebert from Colorado. They're going after her next. They're calling her, AOC is basically saying, this woman is threatening to kill me because she wants to be able to carry on Capitol grounds because she has an open carry license already in her home state of Colorado. Her main thing is the Second Amendment. That's how she got famous. So they're going after Boebert next. Who else are they going to go after? Sooner or later, and you take one look through the Lincoln Project's Twitter feed, and I know you could argue maybe they're an outlier, but the Lincoln Project is already declaring that Kevin McCarthy and Elise Stefanik from New York, among others, describe both of them as seditionists. Really? Kevin McCarthy and Stefanik, two of the most milquetoast Republicans, seditionists? Sooner or later, they start with the Steve Kings and the Marjorie Greenes and the Lauren Boeberts. They will eventually get to the McCarthys and to the other Republicans in the House. They will come for all of them. So if we don't hold the line now and defend these people, sooner or later, as I know, if there's one thing that can be said about the left over the last couple of years, certainly the last decade, but especially the last couple of years, it's that they have proven that the slippery slope is no longer a rhetorical fallacy to be made in debates or arguments. It is a tactic of theirs. Within a few years of the legalization of gay marriage, we have 7-year-old trans kids. Within 1 year of Alex Jones getting completely deplatformed, banned off every social media platform, they banned Donald Trump while he was still in office as president of the United States. You don't have to like Alex Jones to support him. I'm not saying I like Alex Jones. But to see that they went that quickly from this nutjob conspiracy theorist to censoring the president of the United States.
Okay, well, a lot there, a lot to unpack. But let's back up. You mentioned sedition. You mentioned calling for violence. Marjorie Taylor Greene at a rally told her supporters that Nancy Pelosi is a traitor, and you know what we do to traitors. It shouldn't be any surprise then when I'm on my way to the Stop the Steal rally on January 6th and I'm surrounded by a bunch of people saying that the people who don't support sending the ballots back to the states are traitors and that we need to hang them all along Pennsylvania Avenue. It shouldn't be any surprise then when you have QAnon supporters running into the Capitol then claiming that we need to hang the traitors, building a gallows in Washington, D.C. When she's putting out rhetoric like this, saying that Nancy Pelosi is a traitor, you know what we do to traitors. I don't think she knows what the legal definition of treason is. That's why she would give reckless rhetoric like that.
But at least the Democrats have been saying the same thing about Trump, calling Trump a traitor. And how many Democrats? Maxine Waters, one of the most infamous examples, where she's at a rally with a bunch of her supporters and saying, if you see a member of the administration in a restaurant or gasoline station, you push back on them and tell them they're not welcome anywhere near us. You push back on them. They're calling for violence. They were doing this years ago.
There's a significant difference between telling someone they're not welcome and wanting to threaten, basically riling up a mob to go hang them.
That's what the Democrats have done, though. They've called Trump a traitor, too. They repeatedly, how many times do they call Trump a traitor?
And we attack the Democrats for that. We attack the Democrats when they do that. We condemn the Democrats when they do that. It's not like we're not saying anything when Democrats don't do it. But moving back to you mentioned going back to the communication. Like Steve King, you said that Steve King did a better job. We can agree on that. Steve King did a better job communicating than Marjorie Taylor Greene did and defending himself. Okay, well, I don't think that Marjorie Taylor Greene's failure to defend herself is based in her incompetence. I think it's very strategic and done on purpose. Here's the thing. You mentioned how they were talking about she's claiming that Israeli lasers, whatever, started California wildfires.
No, she said space lasers that they claimed. She said Jewish because she didn't say it's from the Rothschilds. They were two separate points, but they connected those two very lazily. It's well done on their part, but it was wrong.
But the point is they were making that connection. That is easily grounds for defamation. That is an easy grounds for defamation suit. She's not filing any defamation suits. In fact, she's not even in. Whenever you listen to her interviews, whenever she goes on TV, goes on radios, podcasts, she doesn't even mention any of this stuff. When she's asked about it, she skirts around the issue. And here's why. She has been raising a ton of money from her supporters by running on the theme that I'm being attacked for having supported Trump. I'm being attacked for being one of you. I'm being attacked because I stand up for conservative values. And the more she milks these attacks, the more she ignores the issue of her statements, the more she's attacked, the more money she can raise from her constituents. I'm getting hit because I made the mistake of donating to the Trump campaign. I'm getting spammed constantly by the RNC from these candidates who are sending out massive text messages soliciting money. Marjorie Taylor Greene is among them, and she's using these attacks to raise money.
Yeah, so, you're not wrong. I do follow her on Telegram. Every other post from her is posting about, like, donate here to join the fight. Like, yes, she absolutely is raising money. She's a politician. That's what they do. But I think her point, they're attacking me because I'm MAGA. I'm America First. I support Trump. She's right.
She's not right.
That is the reason they're going after her.
That is not the reason they're going after her.
Absolutely it is.
No,
why else?
Why else? They're going after her because they think she's a QAnon supporter.
Hey, they're also calling Lauren Boebert a QAnon supporter. They claim Trump is a QAnon supporter. That's another smear they do.
They don't claim that Trump is a QAnon. Nobody ever claimed that Trump was a QAnon supporter. They're going after her specifically because she very explicitly supported QAnon. So here, going back to what I said earlier, if there's a member of Congress who I believe is a QAnon supporter, I'm voting to remove them from their committee assignments, even if they're on the same team as I'm on. And the reason why they still thought that she was a QAnon, here, all she had to do, all Marjorie Taylor Greene had to do was back in November when people were saying she's a QAnon supporter after she won election, she could have gone on CNN. She could have gone on Fox News. She could have gone on every single media outlet. She could have put it out on social media that she is not a QAnon supporter. How hard would it have been for her to say, I'm not a QAnon supporter? If somebody is accusing you of being a white supremacist, do you ignore it? No, you just say, I'm not a white supremacist. Now, are they going to keep accusing you of being it? Okay, they may. But at least you could go on record and say, this is not what I am, and move on. Well, she never did that.
The problem with that is, though, and this is another rare point where I will cite something Ben Shapiro said in a positive manner. He says, if someone calls you a racist, you don't even acknowledge that because that's if you then start arguing whether or not you're a racist, like, no, I'm not a racist, you're letting them drive the narrative and control the conversation because the debate should not be whether or not you're a racist. The debate should be whatever the policy disagreement was that led to them calling you a racist just because they don't like you. So, no, absolutely, yeah, if they accuse you of being a white supremacist, if someone accused me of being a white supremacist, I'd immediately disregard it and not even answer because I'm not going to grace a stupid question with an answer because it doesn't deserve an answer.
Here's the difference between that analogy. So, basically what Marjorie Taylor did, if we're going to compare white supremacy and QAnon, this is the equivalent of what Marjorie Taylor Greene did in that situation. In 2018, she said, I am a racist. And now she gets elected, and they're saying she's a racist, and she ignores them. So it's not like they're accusing you of being a racist for holding a policy position. You said you are a racist back in 2018. You get elected, and they're saying she's a racist, and you keep mum about it. You don't say anything about it.
That would be a different situation.
This is the situation with QAnon.
But I don't think, because again, QAnon is, you can bash QAnon all you want. Yeah, it's stupid. But I still do not think that is a reason, even if she was a QAnon supporter. As long as the Democrats still allow outright anti-white racists, literal jihadi sympathizers like Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, or other radicals who obviously have racist tendencies against white Americans or just anti-American views in general like AOC, as long as they have people like that in their party and who not only are in their party, like they're not ostracizing them like they are Steve King or Marjorie Greene, but they are elevated and have positions of influence in the party, I don't want to hear it. We should play the same rules they play and defend our own so-called quote-unquote radicals until and unless they start excommunicating theirs. Okay, so if we look at this from a pro-Republican, pro-conservative position, since we are conservative nationalists, I see Marjorie Taylor Greene as a liability for the Republican Party because what she does is she gets supporters who would normally be the bulwark of defense against a radical leftist corporatist regime to focus on giving her money because she's being attacked by the left. So moving forward, what does Marjorie Taylor Greene fight for? So far, she's not fighting really for anything. She's just fighting against something, basically like AOC. AOC is really, a lot of progressives are waking up to the reality that AOC is a liability, that she's not really accomplishing anything. Her big beef is, I hate Republicans. And that's basically what Marjorie Taylor Greene is turning into. Just vote for me. I hate Democrats. I'm being attacked. Support me because they're coming after me because they hate you, all that stuff. We don't need that. We need somebody who is going to articulate policy positions and move the Republican Party in a direction that's going to help Republican voters. And I just don't see Marjorie Taylor Greene doing that. But she may prove me wrong. I see where you're going with that. I mean, I will admit, yes, her raising a ton of money could be problematic, if only because, like I said, she's in one of the deepest blood red districts in the entire country, so she doesn't need money. She's never going to lose, honestly, whereas a lot of that money could go to candidates in swing districts. But to the further point, she's in a red district, R plus 27. Her job is not to necessarily sway moderate voters or give policy stands. Her job is to fire up the base with red meat because she's in a deep red district. And there certainly are others, Republicans, who are good at that, who do tout certain issues. Again, Lauren Boebert, who is seen as very much adjacent to MTG. They tied her to QAnon as well. Her big issue is the Second Amendment. She has at least that one big issue that she stands for. That's what she got elected on. That's her thing. But again, they're going after her next. They're already targeting Lauren Boebert over she refuses to obey the metal detectors rule. Oh, she's like AOC literally says she wants to open carry. She must be trying to kill me. Stupid stuff like that.
So what is MTG's big issue?
I acknowledge, yes, she does not have a big issue, but that's not necessarily her job any more than that's not, I don't know, what's another Republican, like Steve King. Steve King didn't necessarily have a core issue. I mean, he did talk a lot about immigration and multiculturalism, but at the end of the day...
Yeah, that was his issue. That was his issue,
but at the end of the day, Republicans in these deep red districts, their job... Like, a good example is like Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana. Obviously not that John Kennedy. Republican who is in a deep red state like Louisiana. You ever see him on Fox News? You ever see, like, some of the sound bites he gives? He is one of the greatest at he's an older guy with that Louisiana accent, but he's so great at roasting people. Like, he talks about...
Oh, yeah, he is good at that.
He's so good. Like, just the other day, he was talking about John Kerry, talking about global warming, and he's like, come on, put the bong down, man. What's wrong with you? Like, he just says stupid stuff like that.
He's one of the best in the Senate, for sure.
He doesn't have an issue. He's just great at roasting Democrats or firing up the base and getting people yucking it up over a great soundbite. Some Republicans are better in that role, and I think Marjorie Greene is certainly better in that role. She doesn't need to be a policy.
She fires up the base all right, but it's the wrong base that she's firing up with her antics.
I don't know. As far as I'm concerned, the only wrong base are the Never Trumpers, the Lincoln Project types, the Evan McMuffin voters, the people that, again, and I think where we disagree here, we both agree there needs to be cleaning house in the Republican Party. You think it needs to be from the far right flank.
No, that's not necessarily true. I agree. We agree that the house cleaning needs to come from the Liz Cheneys and all them.
The Cheneys, the 10 who voted to impeach Trump, and I think the 11 who voted to remove Marjorie Greene as well should also, because there was some overlap between those people and those who voted to impeach Trump.
I mean, I don't really see those as the same issue. I mean, yeah, there was some overlap, but again, with the Marjorie Taylor Greene issue, whenever you're making it, she's becoming a celebrity with the former QAnon people and the people who are still clinging to hope that Trump is going to somehow return like the second coming of Christ and take over the government. And the problem is we need people in Congress who are going to educate people in those districts. And this kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier, why QAnon came into why it spread so far and wide. And Marjorie Taylor Greene actually hinted at this whenever she gave her I regret speech on the floor of Congress. She said that people don't trust the government. I didn't know what to believe. I didn't know what to believe in the media. This was when the Russian collusion hoax was going on, and I got sucked into the QAnon thing. And this is what ended up happening. People just turned off the news. They stopped. They got tired. People don't want to get bashed. People don't want to turn on the news and have these anchors and pundits bash them and the people that live around them, that look like them, that talk like them. So they just turn it off. And then they end up getting their news from these wacky conspiratorial websites that we covered in our second episode. And so it's understandable why people would fall into QAnon. But what we need are politicians, or we need Republicans who are going to be able to educate these voters and explain to them, look, QAnon is wrong. It's not correct, and be able to focus that, because there's a lot of energy that went into that. They need to focus that energy into reforming immigration, into getting some good policies in that will help families grow.
Ending wars.
Yeah, they need to refocus that energy in that direction rather than just support me, give me money because I'm being attacked by the radical left. That's not helpful.
Right. I get what you're saying, but the bottom line is these Republicans who, you say they're tired of being attacked, but the Republicans who bash Marjorie Greene and who vote to impeach Trump and all these things, they're virtue signaling to the media for what? What do they hope to get out of it? Especially Mitt Romney is a perfect example, because obviously now, he's one of the leading anti-Trump Republicans. He's going to vote to impeach Trump again. I am old enough to remember 2012. It was my first presidential election. I actually was not even old enough to vote in the primary, but I was old enough to vote in the general. I remember when Mitt Romney, back then, squeaky clean Mormon grandpa in his 60s, was the nominee. He had been a missionary, he was a businessman, all that stuff. And they still, let's see, what did they accuse him of? They accused him of being an animal abuser. They literally accused him of killing a woman. They ran that campaign at that cartoonish caricature ad of a Paul Ryan lookalike literally pushing an old lady in a wheelchair off of the Grand Canyon. They still did all these things to Mitt Romney, of all people. If they could do that to Mitt Romney, who look where he is now, they will do that to literally every Republican. So this idea, if we just get rid of the QAnon, the so-called radicals, they'll be nice to us. No, they won't. And if you give them just a little bit of an inch, like I said, slippery slope, give them even an inch, they'll take 3,000 miles out of it, and we can't let them do that.
Look, the goal is to get people to vote for a nationalist, and you're not going to convince people who are apolitical, who are normies, to vote for your candidates or your party if you've got somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene running wild. They're just going to point to that and say, no, I don't want to be a part of that party. I don't want to join any of that. Well, I mean, how can you defend that? Because you can't. The thing with Steve King is you can defend Steve King. You can defend.
His only crime is that he basically held the same opinions on immigration and those key issues that Trump would eventually go on to hold.
Right. You can defend Steve King. You can't defend Marjorie Taylor Greene on any of this stuff. There's literally none of the stuff that you can defend her on, unless you want to just say, okay, well, she should have been more communicative. But again, we have a disagreement about why. You seem to think that the reason why she didn't communicate better was because why? She was incompetent. She didn't know how to talk. I mean, what was the reason behind that?
This is her first time being elected to Congress, so that certainly could be a reason. She just doesn't yet know how to communicate well. That could be a reason. I don't know. You're right. Maybe you have a point that maybe she does still believe this stuff. I don't know. But the bottom line is that should not justify her being removed from her committees by the majority party with the precedent that sets. And again, for things she said before she was elected. Could you imagine if we could punish office holders for things they did before they were elected?
Well, wait a minute. Are you saying that if she still believed that stuff, that she should still keep her committee assignments?
I don't know, honestly. I mean, the Republican leadership made those calls to put her on the committee. So if McCarthy or whoever, the steering committee, whatever, put her there, they saw it fit. That's their choice. It's not like I voted for her to be on a committee or something. And furthermore, the people who voted for her to represent them. So this is also really screwing over her constituents as well, just like what they did to Steve King.
Which makes me wonder, do the constituents of that district believe, are they mostly QAnon supporters?
They overwhelmingly voted for her against like 8 other Republicans, and then a runoff election with her one-on-one versus another Republican.
That's what's worrying to me.
At the end of the day, who are we to tell them who they can and can't vote for?
That's true, but I'm just wondering, did they not? I'm willing to believe that most of the Republicans in that district may have been QAnon supporters, which speaks to a bigger problem in our ability to communicate and explain issues and what we stand for.
Like I said, even if that is true, I still personally would not consider that nearly as big of a threat as the constituents who saw fit to elect and reelect a literal jihadi sympathizer like Ilhan Omar. Like, call me racist.
I agree.
That's a much bigger threat.
No, I agree with that. But my concern is that when you have a base of voters that are easily falling into some of the dumbest conspiracy theories out there, who literally think that the TVs are going to go black before Joe Biden takes the oath of office and Trump's going to send in the military and take over. We need people elected who are going to be able to we need people who are going to communicate to their constituents the way that Marjorie Taylor Greene does often, but we need that communication to be educational, to explain to them the way AOC, you know how AOC communicates to her constituents. She'll be at home in her apartment, she'll be cooking, and she'll explain what they do in Congress and stuff like that. Even the way who's the one-eyed bandit from Texas that we can't stand?
Dan Crenshaw.
Dan Crenshaw. So
a reincarnation of John McCain.
Right. As much as I can't stand Dan Crenshaw, he does do a very good job of communicating to his constituents on social media. We need somebody like that from like the 14th District of Georgia to explain to these people that obviously don't know any. And here's an example. I'll just give you a perfect example. I was in Alabama. This was in June, actually. And I was talking to an older gentleman. Well, I say older. He's older than I am. He's in his 50s, but who has a construction company. And he was just starting to get red-pilled on politics. And he knew that I knew a little bit about this stuff. And he asked me, Jacob, what's the difference between the House of Representatives and the Senate? And at that point, I'm like, he owns a company. He probably is worth 7 figures. And he's just now in his 50s starting to watch Fox News, whereas beforehand, I don't think he consumed any news, any political news. And he's asking me what the difference between the House of Representatives and the Senate is. So if this is the base, conservative elected members of Congress they have a responsibility to educate that base to be effective voters, because obviously, look, the heartland in America, they understand that they're under attack by the corporations, by the industry, by the media. They understand that these industry leaders, they want to Morgan Wallen all of them, but they don't really know how to fight back. They don't know what to believe, what direction to go in. And
a lot of them wouldn't even vote under normal circumstances unless a Trump or a Marjorie Greene came along. I would argue that
unless a Trump came along. I don't know. I mean, the thing is,
they vote for Trump, and then Marjorie Greene comes along and says, "Hey, I can be like Trump from your district." And again, not necessarily that excuses everything, but the bottom line is, say a lot of these people, these rural voters, whatever can turn these people out to vote for Trump, because when he comes back in 2024, assuming he's the nominee and he runs again, you gotta because especially these same people who now think they'll throw their hands up and say, "You might as well not vote again." No, we want those people to come out and continue to vote.
Well, of course we want them to come out and continue to vote, but the problem is after they vote and the media industrial complex attacks the person they voted for, they don't know where to go for their information. And so when people start throwing up false information that confirms their biases, they believe the false information, even if it leads them off a cliff like we saw on January 6th. So I see Marjorie Taylor Greene as an opportunist who jumped on board the QAnon stuff and wrote it to Congress. And now, once she's elected to Congress, rather than doing something productive to bring these people along, in a more productive direction that can actually help the party win elections in the future, she's instead doubling down on just Sarah Palin type stuff. I mean, what did Sarah Palin? Sarah Palin was just as popular with Republicans, especially
in Alaska, at least,
especially middle-aged Republican women, as Marjorie Taylor Greene is in her district. But what did Sarah Palin ever accomplish other than making a bunch of money selling books?
I mean, the bottom line is, yeah, you're not necessarily wrong. I can see where you're coming from. But the bottom line being, she didn't even get a chance to start doing anything or be communicating on any issue or anything before they suddenly slammed her with this. The first thing she actually did, I think, as a member of Congress, was she introduced articles of impeachment against Joe Biden, which I think is amazing. I mean, that's never going to pass in a Democrat House. But she didn't even have a chance to get started before they threw the book at her. And again, Lauren Boebert is next up. And then who else is going to come after Lauren Boebert? Who knows? They're going to keep going. Once they get one scalp, they're not going to stop.
Like I mentioned before, Republicans, rather than using the slippery slope analogy, they need to stop and think, okay, why did they get that? Why did the Democrats get that scalp to begin with? What can we do? What could we have done differently to avoid them taking that scalp, rather than circling the wagons even tighter? We need to stop and figure out where we made a mistake, because they didn't come after just any Republican. They came after her specifically, and the news media loves Marjorie Taylor Greene. She gives them the same kind of ammunition that AOC has given Fox News since 2018. And this is a problem, because they're going to be focused on Marjorie Taylor Greene. They're going to be able to use Marjorie Taylor Greene the same way, and the anti-Marjorie Taylor Greene sentiment the same way they use the anti-Trump sentiment. So rather than focusing on issues, they just focused on Trump. Rather than focusing on issues, they just focus on Marjorie Taylor Greene. This is the problem I see in her.
I see the point you're making, but again, I would simply argue from what we've seen in the past, they will do this to literally any and every Republican that crosses their path. They're already doing it. Josh Hawley is another perfect example. The dude is a star in the America First movement. He's already positioning himself very nicely to be a front runner for 2024. Young guy, good-looking guy, very great speaker. If you ever listen to him speak, he's got a great speaking voice. They're trying to get him expelled from the Senate because he was the first senator to vote to object to the Electoral College results. And they're also going after Ted Cruz. They are going to go after every Republican who has a chance at actually being a real threat to them, until the only ones left are the Romney types. And even then, they're still going to attack the Romneys when they feel like it. They're never going to stop. That's my argument. Again, you can say what you want about Marjorie Greene. I'm not even, I like her enough. If some of the stuff is true, then I'll be a little more hesitant. But solely for the good of the party and for realizing what their goal is, what their end game is, for that reason alone, I would rather stand by her and defend her every step of the way. I would rather have a Marjorie Greene who, whatever she says and does before she's elected to Congress, she will be loyal. She will vote in support of Trump. She'll vote in support of the MAGA agenda, the America First agenda, versus a squished Republican like the 10 who voted to impeach Trump, or the 11 who voted to remove her, or the Romneys, the handful, the 5 or however many Republican senators who will vote to impeach him in the trial. And that is all I care about, is we've got to have that unity. And you're way more likely to have that unity when it's behind Trump and you expel the Never Trump movement, which is much smaller than the pro-Trump faction.